Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com. Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Ray Flowers breaks it all down for you from a fantasy sports perspective. Hey there, everyone. Ray Flowers of FantasyGuru.com. Hope you're doing well here on this, what the hell day is today? It's Tuesday, right? 22nd of October. My mom's birthday is coming up in a couple of days. Shout out to my mom. She won't be seeing this or listening to this, I'm sure. But hey, you never know. Hope you're all doing well here as we get ready and turn the calendar from week 7 to week 8. We won't really do that, of course, because we'll discuss what happened last night on Monday Night Football on the show today. But we'll start looking ahead to week 8 in the fantasy football season. Again, I'm Ray Flowers of FantasyGuru.com. Thank you for joining me today, as hopefully you do most days. As I say all the time, tell a friend. Free show here. We hope it's kind of a gateway drug to what we do over at FantasyGuru.com. But even if it's not, tell a friend. Let's get the viewership up. Let's get this thing rocking and rolling, moving forward. Again, I'm Ray Flowers of FantasyGuru.com. You can find my work there, of course. You can find me on social medias at The Ray Flowers. Just type in at The Ray Flowers. You'll probably find me there. You may not find any activity there, but you'll probably find my account there. Obviously, in Discord all the time over at FantasyGuru.com, answering your questions as well. I'm here on the show. This show, Fantasy Sports Daily, as you well know, I'll go through it. You hear it every day. Monday through Friday, 12 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time is the show. I'm on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Justin Feshman's on Wednesday. That's how we do things. On Wednesdays, I'm on with Jeff Mans on the Elite Sports Show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. That show with Jeff is 3 to 6 Monday through Friday, and I join him on those Wednesdays when I'm not here. What are we talking about today? Well, let's pop it up on the screen, because those of you watching live or listening live on Facebook.com/FantasyGuruHQ, at YouTube.com/@ElitePlusNetwork. You can comment, leave questions, thoughts throughout the show, and we'll address those. So you can do that live. You can also watch live on Twitter X at Fantasy Guru site. You can always go to FantasyGuru.com, go to the Elite Plus tab at the top of the page on Fantasy Guru. You can find this show as well as the others that we have on the Elite Plus network. And then type in Fantasy Sports Daily to your podcast network. As you can see on the screen there, we'll talk some Monday Night Football. We got a doubleheader, 2 games. Lots to discuss there with those 2 games, so we'll break that all down. We'll talk a little bit about some of the news and notes of the NFL on a broader perspective too. What's the latest update with Jayden Daniels? What the hell's going on with the second-time suspended Jameson Williams? What about CMC, Deebo Samuel in San Francisco with the Brandon Ayuk injury? Lots of problems right now for the 49ers. And then DK Metcalf with that knee issue we talked about yesterday. Seems to be a little bit worse than we talked about yesterday, but not really bad at this point. So we'll talk more about that. We'll also visit in about a half an hour with Armando Marsal. He comes on every Tuesday, ostensibly to talk waiver wire with us. And as you can see there on the screen, got a lot to talk about. Tagovailoa, Jameis Winston, Tyler Goodson, Kendre Miller, Kimani Vidal, Juan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall with the Niners, Jalen McMillan with the injuries to the Buccaneers we'll talk about here in a few moments, Cedric Tillman, who you should have had last week, Tim Patrick because of Jameson Williamson, and Cade Otton. So lots to discuss here on the show today, and we hope that you'll stick with us and enjoy it as you do every day, Monday through Friday here on Fantasy Sports Daily. All right, let's start out with the first note here. The Ravens defeated the Buccaneers 41-31. It wasn't that close. Somehow, Lamar Jackson has been better than he was last year. He shouldn't have won the MVP last year. It should have gone to Josh Allen. But he's been better than that this year. The Ravens moved to 5-2. The Bucs fall to 4-3 with the victory last night for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson threw for 5 touchdowns. This team scored 41 points. And he threw 7 passes to wide receivers. It's remarkable. The efficiency the Ravens are showing is remarkable. And as Phil Backer, the resident Ravens fan at FantasyGuru.com and SiriusXM said, they're just so damn explosive. Were you watching the broadcast last night when the commentator was like, well, maybe Derrick Henry will rip off a big run here, and then 3 seconds later, there's an 81-yard run? Like, it's just all over the place. But I think we got to start with Lamar Jackson, who, I'm going to say a dirty word, okay? So, turn the volume down or hide the kids or whatever. Lamar Jackson often has the shits, okay? He does. He's got the brownout. We'll call it a brownout. Maybe that's better. He's got the brownout. He has a lot of diarrhea. I'm just gonna keep using euphemisms for poo. He misses games a lot. He misses practices a lot. And his history says he's going to miss games a lot, either because of irritable bowel syndrome or because of something else. That's the real concern at this point with Lamar Jackson, because it's nothing on the field. On the field, he's spectacular. He ran for 52 yards yesterday. He always does that. He always seems to run for 50 yards every week. He used 22 passes to throw for 281 yards and 5 touchdowns and carved up the Bucs. Now, he should have been able to have success against them. The Buccaneers defense is beat up. Their pass coverage is messy. But that was a virtuoso performance last night for Lamar Jackson. As long as he can avoid the runs, Lamar Jackson's going to continue to be in that MVP conversation, both in the real world and the fantasy world. And it is remarkable that he can continue to have that success given the lack of involvement for the wide receivers that we'll talk about here in a second. Derrick Henry was doing very little through over half this game until that 81-yard run. And in the end, he carries the ball 15 times for 69 yards, and he ends up catching a 13-yard touchdown pass. And it's at some point, there's bankable commodities in the fantasy space. And while there was obviously some concern with Derrick Henry because he's an aging player who's taken hit after hit after hit after hit in his career, there was some concern about, is he still going to be elite Derrick Henry? Is he going to be a solid running back? Like, how is this going to play out? And we saw this reflected in his ADP. People if we had a midseason draft, we were starting around, Derrick Henry's probably a first-round draft pick, right? Especially with all the injuries at this position. You saw it last night on the 81-yard run. He still has the speed and burst. You saw him move the piles. You saw him do everything that Derrick Henry does. And it is rather remarkable that through half this season, he is one of a handful of players that you call a fantasy league winner. And, it's the first time I think you can say that about Derrick Henry where you didn't have to spend a top 12 pick on him, right? Like, he's been fantastic. And he's, he got the touchdown as a pass catch last night, which was nice. They allowed him to do that there late in the game. But the fact is that his rushing ability is superb. And we're continuing to see he and Lamar Jackson. I mean, again, last night, the two guys ran for over 200 yards last night. And they continue. You see this every week. The stats come out. Quarterback, running back. Through 5 games, through 6 games now, through 7 games. No running back duo or running back quarterback duo in NFL history has run for more yards through 7 games. I didn't see that this morning. I'm sure it's the case, right? It's just remarkable. And there's no reason to have fear right now with Derrick Henry other than injury. And, it's not I'm old and I'm slow. It's not I'm old and I lost my skills. It's not like I can't break a tackle anymore. It's just the injury piece. And that has nothing to do with being 32 or 22. It is just what it is, right? But Derrick Henry, just remarkable. Moving on to the receiving core. I said this earlier. Rashad Bateman had 4 targets. Nelson Aguilar had 2 targets. Zay Flowers had 1 target. Normally, when you have 7 targets to the wide receiver, your offense is broken. You don't normally score 41 points and stomp out an opponent. So it is remarkable what they're doing. Zay Flowers had a killer matchup. And we talked all about him all week, last week, but all week, leading into the matchup with the Bengals, the Buccaneers here, and we thought it was going to be another one of those 8-catch, 100-yard touchdown efforts for Flowers. He tweaked his ankle early, and maybe that had something to do with it. Let's pull the numbers up here just so I'm not losing my mind here. I don't think that he missed a tremendous amount of snaps. Yeah, he did. Bateman played 45 snaps. Flowers played 42. There were 56 snaps. So Flowers was out there. Was the fact he wasn't involved because of the ankle? I don't know. But this is the real problem in the fantasy space. Zay Flowers is the number 1 wide receiver for the Ravens. He is. Bateman's come on strong here. He's had some nice games, including yesterday. 4 catches for 121 yards and a touchdown. Really strong game for Bateman. And he's in that 4-catch, 55-yard zone every week. Problem is, even yesterday, when he goes for this big game, 4-1, 21-1, he had 4 targets. He's getting 4 or 5 targets, and that's it. The number 1 wide receiver is Flowers. The problem with Flowers is what we saw last night. He had 1 carry for 19 yards. He had 1 catch for 11 yards. And this is how things have gone basically for the majority of his 1.5 NFL career with this Ravens team. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. Look at these target totals. 10, 11, 4, 2, 12, 9, 1. He's got 3 games with double-digit targets, a 4th game with 9 targets, and then 3 other games with 4, 2, and 1. And when you have a matchup like last night that on paper says yes, and then you get this. And this is why the head-to-head scoring system is so interesting in fantasy football, because there's still a chance that, the season's over and Zay Flowers is the top 15 wide receiver. There's still a chance that happens, especially with the injuries that keep coming. Godwin went down. Evans went down. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, okay. But the consistency on a weekly basis is simply not there with Zay Flowers. His PPR points, 11, 22, 5, 2, 19, 22, 4. Oof. And just another effort last night. Again, Bateman, are you going to add Bateman off the waiver wire if he's still out there? Sure, you can do that. But remember, it's 4 or 5 targets. And really, I don't know how desperate most of you are. It seems like, and we talked about this yesterday again on the show, a lot of you are in 2 wide receiver leagues. Bateman's not a wide receiver 2. He's not really a wide receiver 3 because he's getting 5 targets and catching 4 of them for 55 yards. He's our 9 or 10 point guy. If he doesn't get in the end zone, who cares about 9 or 10 points? So there's really no way to look at the way the offense is operating with the Ravens right now and think that Bateman's going to be more than that. Is he going to catch 7 passes for 95 yards a week? In this offense, can't see it. And if it's going to happen, it's Zay Flowers. Sorry, I got something in my eye. It's Zay Flowers. So frustrating, but it is what it is. Now, the interesting thing at the tight end position is, if you take out the week 1 explosion for Isaiah Likely, when he had 427 fantasy points. Likely last night, by the way, 4 targets, 2 catches, 17 yards. I'm not really sure. I don't know. Was that throw that Lamar Jackson made that was knocked down at the line of scrimmage at the goal line, was that throw for Likely or Andrews? Really hard to tell, right? They were both running crossing. They were right there together. I think it was Andrews. It might have been Likely. But Likely 2 catches for 17 yards. If you remove the first game of the season, and I checked this morning, in a PPR setup, so from week 2 through 7, where does Isaiah Likely rank at the tight end position? 10th? 15th? 7th? 21st? 21st. Remove the first week of the season, Isaiah Likely, tight end 21. Wasted, right? And we talked about this a lot when it happened. Shared with you the idea that everyone had Likely as a tight end 1 and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, tight end 21. Last night, Mark Andrews, 4 catches on 4 targets for 41 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, the Buccaneers, for some reason, didn't want to cover Mark Andrews last night, which you do that, and guy scores touchdown. But he had scored 2 touchdowns last night. Mark Andrews, since week 2 of the season, remember, Isaiah Likely's 21st. Mark Andrews, since week 2 of the NFL season, is tight end 9. I've been an Andrews over Likely guy the whole time. I am not surprised by either 21 or 9 here. That is not to say that next week Likely doesn't go for the 5 and the 75 and Andrews goes 220. That's the power, the strength, and the confusing nature of the Ravens offense. It's why other opponents are having a tough time stopping them because they don't necessarily know how it's going to go. And it's why it's so frustrating in the fantasy space. You look at the usage last night, Likely and Andrews were separated by 3 snaps. They were separated by 3 routes run. On the field, the same amount, running the same amount of routes. Targets, there was only 1 difference between the 2. Or was it the same? No, it was the same. They both had 4. So it is what it is. Hopefully you did your best to hold on to Isaiah Likely because the position is such a mess that you can't preclude him from being a tight end 1 the rest of the way. And you couldn't preclude Likely from being a tight end 1. I prefer Andrews. I have 1 league, Scott Fishbowl, where I have both because that's a tight end premium league, and we have 22 roster spots. So I have 3 tight ends in that league, and I've been starting Andrews here, and luckily it paid off last night. On the other side of things, Baker Mayfield threw for 370, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. A strong fantasy game despite the couple of turnovers. Obviously, living kind of on the edge there, as always, is Baker Mayfield. But now we've got some legitimate concerns with Baker Mayfield beyond Baker Mayfield because obviously we got the injury to Mike Evans. Mike Evans caught a pass for a 25-yard touchdown last night. He had another ball in his hands. He was diving in the end zone when he hurt his hamstring again. Didn't catch that second pass. Hurt the hamstring. We're hearing that he's going to undergo an MRI today. Very reasonable, if not likely, that he's going to miss some game action here. And we'll wait to see the week 2, 4, 6. We'll wait to see how much time Evans is going to miss. And I have a team where I think 2 teams where I have Evans and Metcalf. That'd be fun here in the short term. But anyway, so Evans is almost certain to miss some time with the MRI on his hamstring. We'll see what that means. Now, you look at the scoreboard here and you look at the box score, and Chris Godwin, 7 catches for 65 yards. Okay, 5 for 50 every week. He's the only receiver in football, I think, that's done that this year. And that streak will stay at 7 games because, as you're all aware, The injury to Godwin is going to require surgery on his ankle. His season is over, all that kind of stuff. Now we have to worry about, is he ever going to be able to get back to where he is? Coming back from knee injuries and knee surgeries. He was heading into free agency. Really unfortunate timing, of course, for your fantasy squad and obviously for him. So Baker Mayfield's now going to be, just like Brock Purdy might be, without his number one and number two receiver, and that's just death to an offense. You saw it last night. Trey Palmer's involved. Jalen McMillan only caught 3 of 8 targets. What's going to happen here? And we'll talk a little bit more about this with Armando Marsal, kind of what he prefers, if you will, in terms of the receivers for this team moving forward, because obviously they're going to have to redo everything. McMillan and Shepard basically worked in and out of the slot last night. Trey Palmer basically took over for Evans. So Trey Palmer's the Evans replacement, if you will. Sterling Shepard and Jalen McMillan are the Godwin replacement, if you will. Sterling Shepard apparently is going to be a thing. The old college connection. I don't know. He only had 1 catch last night for 15 yards, but he's going to have to continue to soak up snaps. McMillan and Palmer are probably the more exciting guys. Probably McMillan is the guy that you should be targeting. What does that turn into? We'll talk more about that with Armando Marsal. Cade Otton obviously had a huge game last night, 8 catches for 100 yards and 10 targets. He played basically 95% of the snaps last night. He's going to continue to be heavily involved in this offense. And if he's on your waiver wire, and he could be, I think you got to scoop. And we'll talk to Armando about him too. You got to scoop because he's getting 8 targets a week now with these 2 top receivers down, right? So that changes the calculus a lot with Cade Otton. Moving on to the other game, the Cardinals defeated the Chargers 17-15. And let's start out on the Bucs side. I didn't even touch on this, but the Bucs game. Oh, that's why I was reading my notes real quickly before we move on to the next game. The backfield was a disaster. All 3 running backs had 5 carries in the first half. Tucker, White, Irving. Tucker had 16 snaps. Irving had 29. White had 39. White got in the end zone, so it looks great. But remember, in the first half, when this game was close-ish, all 3 guys had the exact same carry total. It wasn't until later in the game that things changed. But all 3 guys were involved. White got in the end zone twice, so it made it look like a great fantasy game. And Irving got a touchdown on the ground too. But using 3 running backs just doesn't work for an offense. We've got to be cautious about that moving forward. Cardinals did defeat the Chargers 17-15, moving on to that game. Let's start out on the Chargers side of things. A lot is being made of the fact that 39 passes, 349 yards for Herbert. Way more passing than we're used to seeing, which is great. Problem is he didn't have a touchdown pass. Problem is they scored 15 points. Every receiver on his team is hurt, like all of them. They're all dealing with something. Davis didn't play. Quentin Johnson didn't play. McConkey's beat up. Palmer's beat up. Fecco is beat up. Like it's just. So he throws for 349 yards. Palmer had 4 for 63. McConkey 5 for 46. Fecco had 3 for 45. Jalen Reagor could have had a touchdown on his 41-yard catch, but he got the ball stripped out of his hand inside the 5-yard line. It's a messy group of receivers here for this team. McConkey continues to be the lead receiver. He led the group in catches and targets, again, for 46 yards. He's just that safety blanket thing. He's 10 points a week. That's just – and it's really hard to get excited about there being more, despite the overindulgence in passing last night for the Chargers. Really weird that they struggled so mightily on the ground, had so much success in the air, and still only had 15 points. And part of the problem is the struggles on the ground. 14 carries for 40 yards for J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins was terrific the first couple of weeks. Fantastic, right? 10 yards of carries, ripping off these big runs. Last 3 or 4 games, ugh. I mean, it's just, Edwards is out of the way. And Kimani Vidal didn't do anything. He had 3 carries for 10 yards, had a 9-yard catch. But as we've said here on this show and talked about a lot over at FG, the Vidal season is coming. I firmly believe this. I really do. It was shocking to see the Chargers have their 3 running backs run for 52 yards last night. And it wasn't a game flow thing, right? 17-15. 52 yards. So they got to figure that out. But Dobbins on each progressive week starting to look a little less explosive, kind of as we predicted with that backfield. What have I got listed here? Will Dissly. Got to talk about Will Dissly. We talked a lot in the preseason about Hayden Hurst. We thought Hayden Hurst would be the guy because of the offense and the way things are going to run with the Chargers. Hayden Hurst is going to be the guy. He's got the potential to be a bottom-level tight end 1. 4 or 5 catches, 50 yards a week. Here we go. Didn't happen. Finally happened last night, but of course, Hurst is out of the game with an injury. So we have Tomlinson with a 7-yard catch. We have Smart with a 31-yard catch. And here's Will Dissly with 8 catches for 81 yards. So the 3 tight ends caught 10 passes for 120 yards of offense. That's the role in this offense that we were expecting to see. They've thrown a lot less than we anticipated, so there's been some issues there. But Will Dissly is very interesting now because Will Dissly is a very good blocker. He got a big contract in the offseason to come to this Chargers team. And despite the fact that Hurst continues to run all these routes and Dissly really isn't involved as much that way, he was forced into the role last night, and look at the production. So Will Dissly, do you go out and add Will Dissly? You add Cade Otton over Will Dissly if that's a question. Do you add Will Dissly? I mean, again, he's a good blocker, and if he's going to fill this role in the offense, there is intrigue here. I still want to say because of the involvement of Tomlinson, because of the involvement of Smart, because of the likely return at some point in the near future of Hurst, I want to say that I'm very cautious that Dissly will return weekly tight end 1 production, but he's a streaming option. He's definitely in that mix, especially right now for this team. Okay, let's go to the other side of things. The Cardinals, again, won this game. I heard people say they're in the thick of the race in the NFC West. Well, they are at 3-4. Okay, they are. Niners losing games, Seahawks, Rams. Ugh. But the Cardinals, come on, man. Like, Kyler Murray threw for 145 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. He ran 6 times for 64 yards and a touchdown. So Kyler Murray had a Kyler Murray-like game, and we're years into Kyler Murray now. Years into Kyler Murray now. Years into different coaches, years into different schemes, and it's just the same thing. And what is it? It's 192 yards of passing. It's 50 yards of rushing. And then it's 1 touchdown pass, 1 rushing score, 2 passing scores, no rushing scores. This is what it is. And no matter who it is or what they do, this is it. And the real problem for this is not Kyler Murray, because, again, he's a quarterback 1 in the fantasy space. The problem is, what does this mean for the team? And, you look at the way this team is constructed. We'll get to it in a second here, okay? But let's follow the layout on the screen. We'll tease it. What is wrong here with this offense? We'll get to it in a second. What's not wrong with the offense is James Conner. James Conner ceded a lot of third down work to DeMarcado, and we were wondering, why is DeMarcado catching 6 passes? Why is he out there on third downs? What happened to James Conner? Well, last night, DeMarcado had 1 touch, and he didn't catch a pass. Last night, it was all Conner. Conner, 19 carries for 101 yards. He had 2 receptions for 51 yards to help out there. Yes, that's over 150 yards from scrimmage for him. He was the motor, as he is most weeks this team has success. It's why you always play James Conner. I always get questions every week with James Conner. Do I start him? I never understand it. Start James Conner. Got 150 yards of offense last night. Trey McBride, 7 targets, 5 catches for 51 yards. 10, 11 points in the fantasy space in a cloud of dust. That's what you get with Trey McBride. And why is that? It's because of the way this offense runs. Let's talk about it directly. You go out and you have a generational talent in Marvin Harrison. What, the number 1 wide receiver prospect in a decade? Number 1, according to everyone. This is not me, Jeff Mans, Ted Schuster, Armando Marsal. Everyone in football, everyone in scouting, everyone, right? So you go out and bring this alpha receiver in. And what do? Last night, 6 targets, 3 catches for 21 yards. I said this when the season began. I'm not taking Harrison at his cost. No way in hell am I drafting him at his cost. Why? Because I don't trust Kyler Murray. And we're seeing it play out. Now, you can talk about, and a lot is being made about the OC and the play calling, which is part of this. But it's also about Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, in all of his time in the NFL, has supported 1 receiver to 1,000 yards ever. Kyler Murray goes out there and throws 26, 29 passes a week for nothing. This offense doesn't do anything, and it doesn't matter who the offensive coordinator is, and it doesn't matter who the head coach is. This offense, for years with Kyler Murray, does nothing. Nothing on a weekly basis. And here you go. You've got Marvin Harrison Jr., the number 1 wide receiver prospect. Let's go. And what do they do with him? It's 3 catches for 50 yards every week. They don't scheme to get him the ball. They don't get him the ball. 6 targets last night. What are his target totals? He's had some nice games, but let's look at these real quickly here. I'll pull it up. What are Marvin Harrison's target totals in his games this year in his rookie season? 3, 8, 11, 6, 7, 2, 6. So after the 11 spot in week 3, the last 4 games, he's averaged 5 targets. What are you doing? We were talking earlier about Jamar Chase this week. Why is he not getting more targets? We talked about Justin Jefferson. Why isn't he getting more targets? Those guys aren't getting more targets, but they're still catching 5 or 6 passes for 75 yards and a touchdown every week. They're still difference-making players. Marvin Harrison's not. 45 yards, 36 yards, 0 yards, 21 yards. Now this 0 yards, he was hurt. Okay. But let's say this. 5 for 45, 2 for 36, 3 for 21. His last 2 complete games, he's seen 5 catches for 57 yards. This offense sucks, and I put a lot of that blame on Kyler Murray. You have to continue to start Marvin Harrison, I think, especially in 3 wide receiver leagues, because there is potential for any week for him to have that huge explosive effort. And because you spent a first or second round pick on him, he's your number 1 wide receiver. But they got to figure this out. In order for them to be true contenders in that division, like some people are saying, they got to get him more involved, or it's just a pipe dream. A couple of comments here before we bring in Armando Marsal to talk a little bit of the waiver wire here with him in week 8. We've got an update on Jayden Daniels. The update on Jayden Daniels is that he's got the rib issue. According to Ian Rappaport, it's very much in doubt whether he plays this week. It's starting to seem a lot like Marcus Mariota, who basically did a pretty good Jayden Daniels impersonation last week. It's going to be the starter this week. Too early to tell, but he has been called week to week by Dan Quinn, and here we go. So if you have Jayden Daniels and you're headed to the waiver wire, obviously you've got to make a move to get a second quarterback because it's very unclear whether he's going to play this week. Jameson Williams, if you missed this news, it came out late last night. He's expected to be suspended 2 games for violating the league's policy on performance-enhancing substances. This is a very weird thing. The NFL, it'll come out eventually what we're talking about, but I've read every report I can see. I have no idea what it is. If it's 2 games and not 4, it's probably not a steroid, a PED. But what is a performance-enhancing substance that gets you 2 games and not 4? I don't know. I do know that Jameson Williams, who started out so incredibly hot, has faded in importance. He was catching 5 passes the first couple of weeks. He's down to 4 targets now with the uber efficiency of the Lions offense. Let's not forget, Williams was suspended 4 games last year for betting on non-NFL games. So this is a second suspension for him. He tore his ACL, so he missed the start of his career. Just when you think he's gotten over the hump, there's that. We'll talk to Armando Marsal in a second about Tim Patrick, who appears to be the next guy up for that hot Lions offense. Christian McCaffrey, the reports, according to Kyle Shanahan, is that it would be surprising if Christian McCaffrey played this week. That falls right in line with the expectations that we've kind of all had for a while now, with week 10 being the likely return for Christian McCaffrey. That seems to be the direction we're trending toward. You have to assume, because the Niners took so much time here, that McCaffrey's going to return and he's going to be a running back 1. That's an assumption. I don't know if that's the case. Someone was asking me in Discord at FG yesterday, what do I think? That's my thought. My thought is right now, Christian McCaffrey starting in week 10 is a running back 1 in fantasy. Do I have any basis in reality with that? I'm guessing like the rest of you are. Maybe McCaffrey comes back and he's a 3rd down back the first couple of weeks. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he's back and he's getting 12 touches or 14 touches a week, and we start getting 12, 14 touches from Jordan Mason. Maybe they do that at the start. So it's really unclear, but that would be my expectation right now. The Niners, all kinds of beat up. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk is done for the season with his knee issue. Deebo Samuel was taken to a hospital with fluid in his lungs yesterday, basically pneumonia. I guess he was having a lot of hard time breathing on Sunday on the sidelines and everything, so he was hospitalized. Could he play this weekend? He could. Is it likely that he will? Completely unknown. The Niners might be without their top 2 wide receivers this week. We'll talk more to Armando Marsal about that situation here in a few minutes. DK Metcalf, who we said yesterday was fine because the team said he was fine. Now we're hearing grade 1 MCL sprain. That's the best sprain you can have. And there is a chance he plays this week, but he's also kind of being called week to week-ish. So we'll have to follow those reports all throughout the week. We don't want to start him, have him play 7 snaps like Juju Smith-Schuster. So we'll keep a close eye on that situation with DK Metcalf. Not bad news, but for now, not great news with the star wideout of the Seattle Seahawks. So that's where we're at there. Every Tuesday, though, it's not just me rambling on and blah, 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 blah. We get someone else in here to talk to you, to change things up, to give a different perspective, to bring his insight. You can go to fantasyguru.com, click the Elite Plus tab at the top of the page, and find this show, Fantasy Sports Daily, amongst the various shows that we have at the network. We also have the show, Mind of Marsal, that you can find there, Elite Plus, right at the top of the page. And that's Armando Marsal's podcast, and so we'll bring him in right now. Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com. How are you doing today, Armando?
I'm doing good, Ray. Excited to be here talking some football, man. It's been a wild week 7. It really was a lot of injuries. So obviously, this impacts the fantasy football landscape in a significant way. So we'll break it down here. But this is why the waiver wires are your friends, especially during this time of the season, then when injuries start piling up. And I know we don't have bye weeks this week, but we're still dealing with bye weeks here in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, and we've said a lot. Jeff Mans has been very vocal about this on his Elite Sports Show on SiriusXM. Very vocal about most weeks. It's like, and you've even said this when you've come out and talked. It's like, all right, spend 3%, spend 7%. Like we haven't had many players where it's like, yes, go. We might be starting to get to that point because we're having some big name players that are going down with injuries. So now we're seeing guys that aren't going to fill in for a week or two. Now we're talking about guys that are going to be getting 8 targets for the next 8 weeks. So we'll talk about that with you here on the visit today. But before we get to those kind of players, I wanted to start out at the quarterback spot. We got some injuries there. We're just talking about Jayden Daniels. Tua Tagovailoa, there are leagues where he's on the waiver wire because, you didn't want to stash him forever. You didn't know when he was coming back. You don't have the IR spot. You're in a 10-team league. If Tua's on the waiver wire, how aggressive are you adding him? And are you expecting it to be last year's Dolphins right away? Because with Tua down, this offense has stunk.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad to watch. I watch every single one of those Dolphin games. I'll be honest with you, it is really difficult to watch this offense. In recent weeks, it's just been tough. I think his addition is obviously going to change the dynamics. This offense is built for him, right? It's built on timing, it's built on quick releases, and that's why he's been so efficient in this offense. But do I think it's going to be like last year where they're putting up crazy numbers? I think it's going to be, week to week, right? Like I think in good matchups, they could definitely do it this week. They do have a good matchup against Arizona. I definitely think this offense could get going here, especially if he returns. But I think we've seen defenses that kind of, adapt to this offense and kind of adjust to this offense. And when you have the personnel to be able to cover this offense, you will. But yeah, if Tua's out there at this point, I'll be honest, like it really depends on your quarterback situation, right? I've been asked a lot about Patrick Mahomes. If I have Patrick Mahomes, I'm not going to be overly aggressive on someone like Tua. I'm just not going to go out there. I understand there's frustrations with Mahomes, but I think I've heard Jeff Mann say this before, and I agree with him 100%. Like if I have Mahomes, he's my starting quarterback each and every week. I don't have any, there's no concerns. But if you're hurting at the quarterback position, if you've lost a player, or if you're dealing, if you've been streaming the position and he's out there, yeah, I think being a little bit aggressive here is definitely something to consider because we know what he brings to the table. We know the weapons on this offense. We know Mike McDaniel, when Tua's there, like this is a different offense, right, than what we've been seeing. So I think if he is out there and you are hurting at the position, you should be a little bit more aggressive. But if you're set at the position, this is not a situation where I'm going to rush out and overbid because there are a lot of other positions that we are going to discuss here that I think you're going to be bidding some high dollars on today. Another
quarterback who we don't know for certain if he's even the starter. So we got to say that at the start. But he always seems to find his way onto the football field. If you're in a super flex 2 quarterback league, Jameis Winston's intriguing. Let's not forget last year around the same time, we had the injury to Watson. Here comes Joe Flacco, and it's 302 every week. It could be 302 every week with Jameis Winston. Now it might be 3 picks too. Okay, so there's that. But what are we doing with Jameis Winston, who again is not, unless something happened this morning, he's not been declared the starter over DTR. But it kind of feels like he's going to be the starter for the Browns potentially for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think he should be the starter, right? Like, so this is my opinion. Like, I think he should be starting for Cleveland. I think he will ultimately be the starter here at some point for Cleveland. I expect it to be right away. If you're out there in the super flex league, I do think you should be very aggressive. Like you mentioned, like this is a quarterback who, yes, he's going to turn the ball over 4 to 5 times a game. Like that, we could see those kind of games from him. But he's also going to throw for 400 yards, 3+ touchdowns here. Like there's going to be those kind of weeks. There's going to be weeks where he could potentially throw 400+ yards. Like that's the kind of he's just going to sling it here. So I think you're going to see a different offense here with Winston. Someone that's just going to take a bunch of shots downfield. So I think in a super flex league, he's someone that possesses a lot of upside. Just understand the kind of quarterback that you're investing in. There's going to be some really frustrating weeks where he's still going to get you the fantasy points. Just don't watch the games. Just simply don't watch those games. But yeah, I'd be aggressive here with Winston in super flex leagues.
Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com joins us every Tuesday. If we move to the backfields, let's talk about the Colts situation. Still not certain, Jonathan Taylor is going to play, with the ankle issue. He's closing in on a return. We've seen now for a couple of weeks, Tyler Goodson has looked more explosive. We've seen for a couple of weeks, Sermon be involved, but just not. Goodson seems to have passed, production-wise, he's certainly passed Sermon, and it seems, I think, he might have passed Sermon in the pecking order there as well. So if Goodson's on the waiver wire, and he is somebody that we've been talking about for weeks now here on this show, any interest? Because, again, Taylor's getting pretty close, so we know when Taylor's back, he's getting, 20 touches a week. What are we doing with Tyler Goodson?
So I don't think this is a great week for running backs off waivers. I think if you're in a bind, Goodson, someone that's going to get opportunities here if Taylor misses, assuming he continues to miss games. I think Goodson has, like you mentioned, he's emerged as the best running back here in this backfield right now. He's been playing much better than Sermon. Sermon has had every opportunity possible, and he's just not done anything with those opportunities. We saw Goodson lead the backfield in opportunities this past weekend, and I think that'll continue so long as Taylor is silent. Like, that's the only thing. Once Taylor returns, I think we're going to see here him assume the majority of the workload like we've seen, and him get the 20-plus opportunities with everyone else being made, a couple of snaps in the game. So this is only if Taylor is out. I wouldn't go overly aggressive on Goodson. I wouldn't go crazy bidding on Goodson. I still look at this as him and Sermon are going to split the workload, where Goodson's going to maybe get a 60% versus the 40% to Sermon here. So just keep that in mind. I wouldn't be over aggressive. I do think in deeper leagues you can go ahead and add him, but I think this is a week, Ray, where you go out there and if you still see Tyler Algier there, because he's still out there in the loud leagues. If you still see, Ray Davis out there, like if you see handcuffs, this is the week to kind of do that. And I know we're going to talk about some now. I didn't name those yet, but just kind of like that's what I'm doing here this week. This is kind of a maintenance week at the running back and not someone that you want to go and overbid on.
And I think it's a good point too that, at this point of the season, we have to start looking at our rosters very clearly and closely. And if you're not somebody that believes in handcuffing, okay, fine. But if your handcuff is hanging out there right now, like we see this happen every week, like it's starting to happen every week where that backup running back for some team is starting to emerge, right? So I think it's a good time to consider doing it, especially since those bye weeks are coming up and people are going to be really aggressive on the waiver wire. Armando makes a good point there. What about Kendre Miller? The Saints played 400 years ago, their last game, so people might have forgotten that he got back out on the field. And, Kamara wasn't happy out there. The offense wasn't good out there. Kamara's missed games over the years. Year after year, he misses game action. Seems like Kendre Miller, Jamal Williams is not part of the offense anymore. He's really been phased out at this point. Kendre Miller worth an addition?
So if you're going to do it right, we kind of talked about it last week, but if you're going to do it, this is the week to do it. He played in 29% of the offensive snaps, had 9 opportunities. Not a big game, nothing crazy, but you can still get him cheap, right? But these are the running backs that a week from now or 2 weeks from now, if Kamara were to miss any time and he was still out there, you're going to go out and bid 60, 70% of your fab. This is a great guy to just keep. You don't have to start. Remember, these are running backs you're adding, you're not starting. You add him now, have him on your bench, and you didn't spend a ton of fab on him. He's going to be much more expensive in a case where Kamara is expected to miss time. And I say this all the time, like right now, ETN owners, how much would they bid on Bigsby, right? I'm pretty sure most of them would say 100%, which is a right number. But you could have had this handcuff for 5% at some point in this season, right? So to have that same mentality with Miller. Like you mentioned, Jamal Williams phased out of the offense completely. And we were talking about it all along. Like, it's Miller. He's the favorite here. He's the one that can be that 1v1 replacement for Kamara if needed.
Last night, Kimani Vidal didn't do much, Armando. We talk about the Chargers situation. They surprisingly almost threw the ball 40 times in the loss to the Cardinals. The team didn't run the ball. They ran the ball for like 55 yards out of the backfield. They just didn't. It was not a traditional Chargers game last night. But, Dobbins starts the season hot. J.K. Dobbins, he has 130 yards and a touchdown each of the first 2 weeks. Everyone's pumped up. They got a league winner on their hands. And we all kind of said, 4 games since then, he's failed to run for 45 yards 3 times. He's gone from averaging 10 yards a carry the first 2 weeks down to 3.1 the last 4 weeks. Same thing with Kimani Vidal. Like, now's the time to make the move before the wheels fall off the Dobbins train.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Like, that's exactly how I view it. He's not someone we're going to start, not someone we're expecting to see a ton of opportunities right away. But this is a situation where we kind of saw early in the season, Dobbins and Edwards 50-50, and Dobbins was outperforming him, leading him to more opportunities. If Dobbins continues to struggle and they start giving Vidal some more opportunities and Vidal starts shining, we might kind of see a shift there. Or if Dobbins, like you mentioned, like he's someone that has, has a case of injuries in his history. So if he doesn't, if he misses any time or if he's hampered by any type of injury or anything like that, we could see Vidal step into a larger role. So for me, a very good stash at a cheap price right now.
Marsal, fantasyguru.com. Wide receiver talk. Let's get into it. The Niners lost Brandon Ayuk for the season. I mentioned the fact that Deebo Samuel apparently got pneumonia now. He's in the hospital, and we'll see how long he's out. Doesn't seem very likely he's going to play this week. He could, but Niners are down. Kittle's beat up. Everyone's beat up for the Niners team. Juan Jennings. Now, Juan Jennings didn't play last week. The assumption is he's very close to returning, so the hope is that he's back and active for the next game for the Niners. If Juan Jennings on the waiver wire, and let's face it, he was huge for a couple of weeks, and people dropped him. How aggressive are we getting with Juan Jennings? Because it's not just one. It could be both guys out. We know Deebo Samuel, much like a Kamara or a Dobbins, misses a lot of time over the years with injury too. Is Juan Jennings someone we get aggressive with? We've seen the production. He's been with the team for years. He knows everything here. And there's a path to him actually being the wide receiver one on this team in relatively short order.
Yeah, I would be very aggressive with Jennings. We talked a lot about Jennings before the season started, and we kind of talked about him after. Like, he was someone I was targeting late in best ball drafts because of the Ayuk situation. And we saw in 2 games, he stepped up in a big way when they were down. 40% target share, 175 yards. That was the night that everyone went and bid all of their fab on him the very next week. He had another productive week and then kind of phased down when they got healthy again. He phased out of the offense. He's also, like you mentioned, dealing with the hip injury, but it's not expected to be serious. So I do think that once he returns, he's going to step into a solidified role. He knows his offense. They trust him. They kept him around for a reason here. All right. And that's because he's someone that they trust and they can count on. I think he's going to be someone that gives you consistent production on a week-to-week basis when healthy right now, moving forward. And there's another receiver in this offense that made a debut, and we could talk about him right here. Ricky Pearsall played 76% of the offensive snaps. He led the team in receiving routes run. Stepped into a decent role right away. He ran 47.2% of his routes out of the slot. So I'm interested to see how they're going to use Jennings and Pearsall, because Jennings has run 55% of his routes out of the slot. So interested to see how they're going to use these two. But like you mentioned, Ayuk out for the season. Samuel dealing with, the fluid in the lungs. That's going to be a very, kind of shaky situation this week, I think. Like you mentioned, I agree with you. Is there a chance he plays? Yeah. But are we confident in that? I'm not. So there's an opportunity here for both these. I'd be much more aggressive with Jenny because I do think that his long-term value and he's, his long-term outlook is just going to be more stable than Pearsall. But I do think if you're in a bind this week, if you're, the injuries are piling up, I think both are very good additions off waivers.
Shifting over to the Buccaneers, last night we saw the terrible injury to Godwin. He's done for the season. We know that Evans hurt his hamstring. We're not clear how much time he's going to miss, but he's going to miss some time. That's got to be the way we're looking at it. He's having an MRI today to determine what's going on there. So there's a lot of guys that we could talk about. Shepard, Palmer, Jalen McMillan, seems to be the guy that you want to be the most aggressive with. Is that how you see the situation with the Bucs, Armando? And what are we doing with this receiving corps? Because that's another scenario where the top 2 wide receivers could be out for X amount of weeks, and there's opportunity there.
Yeah, I would be most aggressive with McMillan here, right? I do. There's going to be another player we're going to talk about after who I think is the one you got to go out and get 100%. But I would be, if you're looking at this receiving group, I would be more aggressive with McMillan here. When you're looking at the numbers, 8 targets last night. I mean, I think the opportunities are going to increase for him. I think we're going to see increased opportunities for Shepard as well. He's another one that I think is interesting that not many people are going to be maybe actively targeting, but someone who I do think, when you look at the routes, like Chris Godwin was their primary slot receiver. That's where Sterling Shepard's going to step in. So I would be more inclined to take the cheaper Shepard here and, kind of pass on McMillan if it becomes a little bit too expensive. That's how I would view it, because we've seen the role here for the slot receiver, and I think that's what we're going to see with Shepard here moving forward.
I think the guy, Armando Marsal at fantasyguru.com, I think the guy you mentioned at the wide receiver spot that you like more is probably this next guy, Cedric Tillman. Now, to be fair, we talked about Cedric Tillman last week. Okay, we talked about him on the show. Jeff Mans talked about him. We talked about him in Discord. Hopefully, a lot of the folks at FG added him, because now, after 8 catches, 80 yards, now it's going to be costly, and it could be even more costly because, as we talked about earlier, Jameis Winston, if he's the starter, he's just going to fling it up. He's going to give his guys a chance to make plays. This is not going to be an offense that's going to throw it 23 times for 161 yards. It's not going to be the way the offense works. Talk to us about Cedric Tillman, and what do you do with him if he's still on the waiver wire?
Yeah, you got to go out there and get him, right? The dynamics of this offense has changed entirely over the last week, really. You know, they lost their primary target in Cooper, then they lost their quarterback, and now they're going to get a quarterback that's going to take downfield shots. So we saw 25% target share there for Tillman this past weekend. I think that those opportunities are going to be there moving forward. I really do. I think he's someone that, look, he's a young receiver in this offense. This is a team that's going in a different direction. I think they're finally going to go in a different direction away from Watson, given the injury and all of that stuff and everything else behind it. So I think you're going to see Tillman more involved here moving forward. And like you said, like if you didn't go out and get him last week at probably 1%, 2%, if that, then you might have just got him a free addition. You might have to bid a little bit more this week. You're probably going to look at 15 to 20%, and you might have to be more aggressive in some instances in deeper leagues, right? So, but I do think he's a very strong addition off waivers this week.
Armando, what's going on with Jameson Williams? You don't have an answer to that. So let's deal with the fallout. Suspension again, for those that missed it, 2 games suspension right now, performance enhancing something. I don't know what the hell it is. No one knows yet. He had the huge start to the season. Then he started doing the 1 catch for 40-yard thing. Last time out, he had a catch for -4 yards, didn't do anything in the offense. Now he's out 2 games. Here comes Tim Patrick, who seems the most likely guy to step up into that number 2 spot in the offense. There's obviously Khalif Raymond is there too. The Lions are putting up all these points and all these yards with Jared Goff throwing the ball 25 times because he's completing 22 of his passes. He's been fantastic. So there's not necessarily a volume role here for Patrick to step into. But again, he does seem to be the most likely guy to take that second wide receiving spot with the Lions. And this offense is humming right now. What do we do with Tim Patrick?
I wouldn't be overly aggressive. I don't think that there's going to be a consistent weekly floor. I do think he's going to see some increased opportunities here. But like you mentioned, kind of like you look at Jameson Williams, and his role was kind of becoming a little bit more volatile in recent weeks as it is, right? So for me, I wouldn't go overboard. I'd view him as a short-term rental, and mostly in deeper leagues. If you're looking for a boomer bust receiver, I do think that that's what we're going to get here in Patrick. I don't think we're going to get consistency. Unfortunately, there's so many weapons here on this offense. So, but yeah, short-term rental wouldn't bid too much on him.
Finally, before we take some comments in the chat room here, Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com, 2 tight ends that we saw last night. Just quick thoughts. Will Dissly, who caught 8 passes, 3 different tight ends caught passes last night for the Chargers, who threw the ball almost 40 times, which again is not their traditional MO. Will Dissly, a great blocker, not really a significant pass catcher, but the big effort last night. So quick thoughts on him. And I think more directly, Cade Otton, because as we talked about the injuries to the wide receivers, Evans and Godwin, the uncertainty with the receiving core, the fact that they're probably still going to push the ball through the air a little bit. Cade Otton had a big game last night, especially in the second half. Otton and Dissly, your thoughts?
So Dissly, I think like you mentioned, this is not a team that's going to pass this much, right? Like this is not a situation we're going to see them in often. I wouldn't go and chase that production. I feel like that would be chasing a situation that's not going to occur many times. However, I think Otton at this point has become a must-add, and he's an every week starter in my opinion. Like he's given us a very safe floor, and I think his role is here to stay. Baker Mayfield is going to have to lean on someone, right? And he clearly trusts Otton. And the way this man played last night, I mean, if you were watching that game, he was making some great catches and just taking massive hits. He kept getting up, kept going. Like to me, I was like, that's going to increase his for me 5% extra just because of that effort. I'm just going to increase the bid 5% extra because of that. I do think he gives us a pretty steady floor. Look, he's given us at least 7 PPR points in 5 straight games, 10 plus PPR points in 3 of those games. And right now you're expecting his role to increase. I'm in. I think if you're having issues at the tight end position, this is a simple case where you go out there, you bid on him, be aggressive, and you've taken care of that situation now moving forward. So I really think like he's we're talking a lot about the receivers and the quarterbacks, but he should be a priority for anyone with tight end issues.
Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com. Armando, I'll take some of the comments here in the chat room and see what the folks are talking about. Hal's got a question about Justin Fields in a super flex league with Russell Wilson, playing effectively. He's obviously going to start the next game for the Steelers. What do we do with Justin Fields? I know you and I had this discussion last week, kind of jokingly around, right? Like if you're in a Superflex league and he's your third quarterback, totally fine with that. I mean, I think it makes sense to keep a third quarterback around. Let's not forget Justin Fields was a top 10 fantasy quarterback when he was playing, right? So I'm fine in a Superflex league holding him, provided we have the roster space.
Yeah, so long as you have the roster spots or the roster space available, the bench spot available, I would hold him. I have him in our league. I'm planning on holding him. The waivers aren't, great. We're a deep league, so the waivers are a little bit, thin at times. So I'm probably going to be holding him in my home league. The same thing. I've lost a couple of I lost Brandon Ayuk there in both leagues. Actually, I've lost Brandon Ayuk. That he's going to move into the IR spot, so I have an extra roster spot to be flexible. So it really depends on your roster. But if you can hold him, I would, because if he becomes a starter at any point again, you're going to bid a hefty amount of fab on that, and there's a chance that could happen if Wilson struggles at some point, right?
Yeah. Yes. And that, by the way, that Jeff Mann's home league, I've got 4 guys on the IR.
Oh, yeah.
Puka Nacua, Jonathan Brooks, Marshawn Lloyd, Rashid Shaheed, Juju Smith-Schuster just got hurt. I just got back Anthony Richardson. I'm like, is your team a mess there too? 4 guys officially on the IR, and then a bunch of other guys hurt too.
Oh yeah, that team has become a quick mess for me. It was trucking, and then all of a sudden it just derailed. It's really down on a spiral downfall.
Yeah, it happens sometimes, and there's not much you can do. They're so frustrating. Matt B has a question about the rookie receiver of the Bears, Rome Odunze. Are we going to see a breakout post-bye week with Rome Odunze? He was dropped in one of the leagues Matt's in, so he's wondering kind of what the outlook is for Odunze. It's tough. I was talking about, Marvin Harrison. It's tough for rookie receivers in the NFL. It just is. And Rome Odunze's had a couple of nice games, but for the most part, it's been very ineffective from a fantasy perspective, Armando.
I view him as someone you add and you just hold on the bench, right? Like if you're able to do that, you hold him on the bench. If there ever becomes an opportunity where one of the receivers gets hurt or someone else, I think there's going to be a clearer path for targets. Right now they're healthy. They have a lot of mouths to feed there. So there's going to be some inconsistency in his production. I do believe in the talent. I do think he's very good. It's just a matter of there's only one football and, a lot of mouths to feed on this Bears offense.
Henry V says, morning Ray, waiver day, return to the NBA. I saw Joel Embiid's already not playing, so we're already in mid-season form. Are you doing NBA stuff right now, Armando? Like how much are you in the NBA now with the football in full swing?
Yeah, I'll be doing some NBA content. Not this week. This week we have others doing the content, but starting next week I'll definitely be in there, and I'll be in Discord answering questions. I'll be in Discord, any questions as far as DFS lineups or players or anything like that. Fensky has an article coming out today. That'll be posted today. We have a 2-game slate for DFS. I think he's going to be posting bets as well. So I already went in the NBA Discord and just said, good morning. It's time. The season has begun. So pretty pumped about it, man. So yeah, you'll see some articles from myself over there in the NBA content site.
Yeah, Joseph Fensterman, who hosts the show every Wednesday. Tomorrow, obviously, is Wednesday. I'm sure he'll be talking about basketball as he's wont to do. Michael C. asked the following question. Do I trade Jahmyr Gibbs for Justin Jefferson? On the surface, running back 1, wide receiver 1. Okay. He does a nice thing here, Michael, by adding what his team looks like. If he does the trade, his remaining running backs, his top 3 would be Aaron Jones, Mr. Madison, and Mr. Chubb. Do you do this, Armando? Like the trade is fine on the surface, but Aaron Jones has already showed some, physical missteps here, and he's like Kamara, he misses some time here and there. Madison is part of an offense that's spiraling down the drain right now, and he's never been a full-time lead back for the course of the season. And Nick Chubb scored a touchdown last week, but what do you think?
I think, and then I can try to get a trade just for RB too. So they're trying to do multiple trades. So I'm staying put here. I don't think you need to make this trade. I'm staying put here. You're swapping. I really look at this as swapping players. And when you look at both the backfield and the wide receiving group here, it doesn't really change much for me. So no, I'm not making this trade.
Angela lets us know that he dropped Kraft next week, who continues to perform very well.
Yes.
For Cade Otton. So that's, he got Otton, who we just talked about. You said he's a must add. So I think at the time, maybe that wasn't the best move, but now in retrospect, it looks like a great move. Again, just to reiterate, you said you feel pretty confident right now. Top 10 the rest of the way. Tight end Cade Otton is in that class. Tucker Kraft there too, or what?
I think Kraft is going to be more volatile when this offense is operating at full health, right? Like I do think there's going to be some volatility as far as his production is concerned.
Senor Rojo says, GM Bob, is Bob your nickname? Because it's not my nickname.
Not mine.
Not mine. Okay,
no,
so I don't.
Not that I know of. Unless someone gave it to me and I don't know about it, Ray. That's the only way.
Senor Rojo, who's been with us many times. I don't know who you're talking. I don't see a Bob in the chat room either, Rojo. So I don't know who Bob is. But is this a Bob Harris question that you just copied and pasted to us? Anyway, let's answer the question because we talked about all these guys: Pearsall, Jennings, Jalen, McMillan. You said earlier that you would take Jennings over Pearsall. Where does Jalen McMillan fit in with those other two Niner receivers?
Jennings is going to be my top priority. Like if you need, like receiver wise, he's my top priority this week. And then I'll go with McMillan and Pearsall like that. So I would go Jennings, McMillan, Pearsall in that order.
Greg M says needs to pick up a quarterback in a super flex scenario, and Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston are the options. Again, it seems likely that both Winston and Mariota will start this week. We don't know that for certain with either one. We think it's going to be the case. We saw with Mariota last week. The offense continued to rock and roll, his ability to use his legs. We talked a lot about Winston earlier and what it would look like if he's named the starter. Which direction would you go on the waiver wire, Mariota or Winston, Armando? I
would go Winston. I think there's more long-term value for him, and I do think the short-term outlook is just the same like you mentioned. I expect both of these could potentially start this week.
Fantasy Arnold says that we're awesome.
Thank you, Arnold. You too.
And then
you are too.
Yes, a follow-up. Jennings or Tillman? You said you loved Tillman earlier. Are we leaning Tillman over Jennings here with those two wide receivers?
No, I'm still going Jennings. They're very close, but I'm still going Jennings.
Okay. Yeah. And then a final one from Tim. Tim K says, is Leggett droppable? Now, of course, we don't know the context here. So let's just talk about Leggett in general. Adam Thielen's rounding into form with his hamstring injury. He should be back relatively soon. You got Cooker, who's gaining in priority. You got Sanders, the tight end there. At some point, this team is going to go back to Bryce Young, and that might torpedo the offense. We just don't know. What are we doing right now with Xavier Leggett, who's kind of become 2 or 3 catches for 35 yards, and who cares?
Yeah, I mean, look, if Tillman's out there, Jennings are I'm dropping Leggett for any of these guys. It just really is all relative of to who. When these questions are asked, yes, some of these players are cuttable, but who are you dropping and adding? Like, who are you adding in order to drop this player? That's always going to be my follow-up question when they ask this question. But yeah, if some of the players that we've discussed, like if Kendre Miller's out there, if Vidal is out there, if these guys I prefer stashing Vidal, Miller, like these kind of players versus having Leggett occupy a roster spot there. Even if I would drop Leggett for Cade Otton. Like I feel like much more comfortable about Otton's role in this offense moving forward. So yeah, I think he's very droppable.
And just so everyone knows, we did get an update this morning. Cordero Patterson looks like he's likely to return from his ankle injury this week. So Arthur Smith's love child has a chance to play this week to mess everything up now that we're getting 20 carries and 100 yards every week from Najee Harris. Yeah, great news, right?
Why?
Yeah, I know. Armando Marsal at fantasyguru.com. He mentioned he'll be involved with basketball, which he will moving forward here. He's one of our lead guys there too. But obviously, all football the time right now. Talk to us about the next couple of days. You always give the rundown. But maybe people are new to the show today and they don't really know what you got coming the next couple of days. What do you got?
Yeah, so we got so obviously there's the roster coach live stream every Tuesday there. Tomorrow we got the snap and usage breakdown. Then on Thursday we got the weekly staff picks, defense versus position sheets. Those are all updated. The red zone review. Then Friday you got the DFS breakdown. On Thursday I also record the Mind of Marsal podcast that goes live every Thursday afternoon. And then Sunday, the DFS live stream, Chris Rose and myself there every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. And, of course, we got the game day Discord chat. You're in there. I'm in there. Russell's in there. Rich is in there. Tyler's in there. Everyone is in there. Go check us out that morning, and we're answering all the questions possible. Keep in mind, there are a lot of questions that morning, so please be patient with us. We do try to get to every single one of them, but it's always a good time to hang out in there and get your questions answered. So, yeah, lots going on. And then I'll be in NBA Discord a lot this week, usually about an hour before tip-off. Even, if I'm not on the articles or the cheat sheets, I'll be in the Discord answering questions along with Fensterman, Bonder, Serge. We got Mike the Beard. Everyone will be in there. So check us out the NBA Discord as well.
Joel Embiid, did I see a report that he's never going to play back-to-back games ever again? Wasn't there something like that came out? Am I making that up? I think I saw that, right?
I think I read something to that nature, but be careful of the source, right? There was a source the other day that I forgot what it was, and we were like, what source was that? Someone is not going to play, and it was like a false report or something like that in one of our group chats or one of the texts. So just be careful where the reports are coming from, guys. A lot of fake reports out there.
I'm looking at Embiid right now, and I know the NBA's got rules in place now. You have to play a certain amount of games to win an award. Think how hilarious that is. That has to be in writing somewhere, because Joel Embiid won second the MVP playing 68 games. He won the MVP playing 66 games, and Michael Jordan played 82 games when he's 40 years old. I don't know, man. I just, the game is so different to me. I know you're heavily involved. I just, from the outside, I don't get it. I don't get how these guys don't play. Michael Jordan, you don't think Michael Jordan's body was beat up after playing 20 years? He played every game. Anyway, it's a different world, and that's what makes what you guys do at fantasyguru.com so helpful and important to the folks, because the average person, how the hell are you going to navigate all this without some help? So click that subscribe tab in the top right corner, sign up for the basketball product. You get the podcast, Fensterman's Basketball Diaries. You get access to that. You get access to the chat room, the Discord that Armando's talking about, all the articles. Head over to fantasyguru.com and do that. All right, Armando, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining. It looks like you're in Europe at a soccer stadium. Is that are you with the Jaguars? Is that you just?
I was hanging out with the Jags.
Yeah, makes sense. You're from both from Florida, so.
Watching Trevor Lawrence just not do great.
Well, we'll talk to Russell Clay about that. We know that Russell's very sad because Trevor Lawrence is his baby. But thanks for your time today. We'll see you again in another week, and we'll talk to you then. Armando, appreciate your time today.
Yep. Thank you. Always blessed. Good luck to everyone this week.
He's Armando Marsal. I'm Rain Flowers. We'll be back tomorrow here, Fantasy Sports Daily, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Justin Fensterman, Rich Mileto. I'll return on Thursday. For Armando, I'm Ray. This has been Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by fantasyguru.com.